On a daily basis, new Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez fulfills, for me, two purposes, thankfully, at least a few times a week. One is inspiring me to not quit this career just straight out and just move on to something else, open up a board game cafe or something like that. And the other is making incredibly, generally unsexy topics interesting and approachable and seeming more relevant. And we've got that here today with forced arbitration, which sounds really boring, I admit, but it is incredibly important and a very common thing. So in effect, with forced arbitration, if you're working for a company and you have to sign a forced arbitration clause, if you believe that they have abused you in some fashion, if they've broken the law, if they've taken your pay, if you've been sexually harassed, rather than actually being able to go to the courts to seek justice, you have to go through an internal mechanism inside of that corporation, which in theory and in the best case scenario is still relatively independent from the operation of the corporation. But in practice, and you know, that's not the way it actually works out. So why are these even still a thing? Why? That doesn't seem fair whatsoever. It seems inherently anti-worker. Well, there had been a little bit of progress in ending these forced arbitration proceedings and the expansion of them throughout more and more corporations. But then the lobby, so there was a new law, or a new regulation, I should say, under Barack Obama. But then in 2017, gigantic industry lobby groups lobbied Congress to oppose that rule back in the Obama era, where under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it would have prohibited companies from banning class action lawsuits in consumer arbitration clauses. So it would not have gotten rid of all of forced arbitration, but in the biggest cases, these class action lawsuits, it would have made it easier for people to get actual justice. But that lobby effort by the industry was successful, and all but 2 Republicans voted to revoke the rule. That resulted in Vice President Mike Pence casting the tie-breaking vote, and in November of 2017, President Donald Trump signed the joint resolution. The rule was revoked, so we have been moving in the exact wrong direction on this, as in so many different issues. Now, this matters because in forced arbitration, workers are less likely to win their cases, and when they do win, they tend to get much less money than they would in court. But there's actually other reasons that these forced arbitration scenarios are so subversive, which AOC is going to lay bare. But again, just in terms of the stakes, I want you to understand how big of a thing this is. About 60 million American workers are under these sorts of agreements. That is about half of all non-unionized workers. Now, of course, one of the chief things that a union would achieve is not forcing you into this sort of situation. So for non-unionized workers, companies have been incredibly successful in growing these to be a bigger and bigger portion of the workforce. So now we finally have a hearing, which technically the Republicans called. So this is a good thing. There seem to be some Republicans, including Lindsey Graham, who deserves credit for virtually nothing, except in this area, he seems to be at least willing to have a public conversation about the future of these sorts of agreements. And in it, AOC was doing some great questioning. Here is the first section.
Would you say, Mr. Gregg, that arbitration clauses have been used to circumvent the courts on a wide range of issues?
Correct.
Potential misconduct?
Yes, so it's used against workers when it relates to sexual harassment or discrimination, wage theft. It's used in the consumer context when you have a dispute over your credit card or student loans.
So if
Okay, so you see there, it affects a wide range of different complaints against the corporations. But as I said before, it actually has a more subversive and sort of chilling effect on us being able to even know what these corporations are getting up to. And in this next section, AOC is going to tie this forced arbitration in with climate change, actually. And she's gonna explain beautifully how this works in favor of corporations.
Would you say, Mr. Gregg, that arbitration clauses have been used to circumvent the courts on a wide range of issues?
Correct.
Potential misconduct?
Yes, so it's used against workers when it relates to sexual harassment or discrimination, wage theft. It's used in the consumer context when you have a dispute over your credit card or student loans.
So if you're a company and you tuck this clause into virtually anything that you can make an employee or a consumer sign, whether it's a credit card agreement, whether it's an employment contract, you can essentially absolve yourself from almost any form of corporate misconduct. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's what will happen.
Pre-dispute arbitration clauses have developed in the brokerage business. That's what's happened.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I just have to reclaim my time very quickly. But thank you. So you would agree?
Yes.
Mr. Gregg, I'm interested here in the wider impact. We're talking about not just issues of discrimination and worker abuse, but even on a macro level and potentially macroeconomic level. In fact, a federal court now is allowing a lawsuit by Exxon investors to move forward. Investors claim that Exxon knew and kept secret for years internal reports showing that they knew climate change and they knew that climate change was real, and that the fossil fuels and their role in producing fossil fuels contributes to the role of climate change. Yet they undertook a misinformation campaign to hide those internal findings and reports, including.
Okay, so what she is describing there is that we might, in this particular case, have this sort of what is effectively a class action suit against a fossil fuel company being moved out of the shadows and into the public eye in courts. And the important thing there is, it's not just that in this forced private arbitration, you're less likely to actually get justice, or that when you are, you're less likely to make as much money and things like that. It's that regardless of whether you win or lose, it is a private process, which means that when you are revealing what a corporation has done, which can be as individual as like a sexual assault claim or something like that, to as broad as decades of hiding the evidence that their product is contributing to climate change, whether you win or lose in forced arbitration, the public doesn't actually find out the details of that, which means that in the end, it's really a win-win for the corporation when it's something as broad as contributing to climate change. Okay, so if it goes into forced arbitration, and if in the end the individual employees end up making a little bit of money, what's important is that the public doesn't understand how much the companies actually knew and when they actually knew it. That is what is so subversive and so chilling about this. It's that it hides what these corporations are getting up to. It doesn't just hurt the individuals, it hurts the company, or I should say the country at large. And so I don't know that coming out of this will actually have any progress. I don't know if Republicans will actually change their tune on this and finally have some sort of reforms that scale back either the amount of forced arbitration clauses or the sort of topic areas that can be adjudicated under forced arbitration. But it is very important, not just for individual workers' rights, but also possibly the future of our species in the area of climate change, that we have some actual reform in this area. And thankfully, it looks like there are some good, both Democrats like AOC and some Republicans willing to at least have the conversation. Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.